I got to ask you about North Korea. Is there any possibility that the president's language and approach to the leader of North Korea is in step with members of the Armed Services Committee and also his foreign policy team?
What we know is that we have to do something about the situation that is evolving.
We hear you. We understand
Okay.
sanctions, everything else that is happening. But I'm talking about his language, the way he is goading the leader of North Korea in the words that he is using.
Separate out his actions from the discussion that he's having right now that is for the American public. The discussions that he has right now is just as if he was sitting at a coffee clutch talking to folks around him. Take a look at his actions and what he's actually doing. Those are what we're going to be following. That's what we're following within armed services. We're talking about the fact that finally we've got some real serious discussions about economic sanctions, not just around the peripheral, but going after the banks that are actually doing business in North Korea. China has a problem with North Korea as well, and they recognize it. Corruption within their provinces around North Korea is based upon the fact that North Korea is doing things that China doesn't want happening in their own country.
I'm talking about the way the president is speaking about the leader of North Korea. It sounds goading, taunting, childlike. Are you at all concerned about it? Is it at all in step with the Armed Services Committee or the Foreign Policy Team? Does this seem to be a good approach to you?
We'll let the president speak for himself in the direction he's going. Is it the language that I would use? No. But the president is elected. He's the one who is laying out a focus. We still go back to what his actions are. And his actions have been consistent. And finally, we're getting down to the point where we're actually providing economic sanctions that we think will work. This is better than military action. We have to try diplomacy and economic sanctions first. That's what's going on now. And finally, we're doing some things with the major banks in China that will force them to slow down their activity in North Korea. North Korea will feel these sanctions. These are the ones that have just been announced.
But Senator, I think what Mika's getting at is, do you believe these behind-the-scenes negotiations, and it's behind-the-scenes talking, us wanting China to come to the table? We know that Asian culture, they don't like the goading. They don't like the poking, the personal poking. For the president to call him Little Rocket Man, I understand your point. I think you're taking the high road here. But does that talk not impact the ability to reach some sort of diplomatic negotiation that you so desperately, I think we also desperately want?
Time will tell whether or not the president's approach is successful or not. As we've discussed time and again, it's the actions that North Korea sees, their bottom line in terms of their policies, their economic development opportunities, their survival capabilities are based upon other people supporting and subsidizing them, including China, including Russia. That means imports of fuels. It means accepting exports from North Korea and so forth. Those are the critical issues right now. The irritations that this president may very well be sending to their leader may get his attention, may frustrate him, and we're not sure how that's going to play out. Most certainly, the president of the United States has the opportunity to look at it and get good advice from his team as well. How he takes that is up to the president.
David Ignatius joins us from Washington with a question. David?
Senator, I think everyone hopes that the diplomatic efforts will be successful, but I want to ask you about the military side. You're a member of the Armed Services Committee. There's a lot of talk among defense analysts about the need for a crash program to develop what are described as boost phase interceptors that could take out North Korean missiles in the first 2 minutes of their launch. It's an interesting idea. Is that something you think that we should be thinking about spending money on to make that happen quickly?
Yes, but I will also tell you that there are a number of opportunities that we have. We do have some in place today. I will also share with you that there are always new programs under development, some in different phases. But most certainly North Korea has been identified as a problem child for the rest of the world for some time now. We recognize that long term we have to have the ability to defensively protect ourselves and our allies. That takes several different forms. First part is being able to identify when a launch actually occurs as soon as possible. Second of all, to be able to intercept in an appropriate fashion, and then finally to be able to actually make the hit or the kill on the targeted vehicle. All of which, not only do we have some capability of today, but we most certainly have to improve long term. You've seen that in terms of Iron Dome in Israel, which we've participated in, David Sling, and so forth. Those are ongoing processes, all of which can help us with North Korea. You have to understand, though, none of those are absolutely perfect. Diplomacy is still appropriate. Economic sanctions are still the best. Let's do everything we can not to get into a fighting war. But I will say this. If we get into a fighting war, it probably means the end of North Korea.
Gene Robinson.
Senator, just to switch the subject to health care for a second, what are the financial implications for South Dakota? What's the dollar implications of this latest health care bill? How many people will lose insurance in your state? Just specifically, what are those numbers?
Sure. Recognize that we just got new numbers last night, or that we're just looking at today, but in both scenarios, South Dakota actually comes out to the positive. We were a non-expansion state. We'd actually applied for expansion, but we were turned down because we couldn't agree on the conditions of it. So in South Dakota, we will go anywhere from several $100 million to an excess of $1.2 billion over a period of 6 years. So we're actually on the positive side of this, but for two reasons. Number one, for the first time, we actually have Native Americans being recognized as having an entitlement to health care under their treaties, and we can use Medicaid for the first time under this proposal for 100% federal funding rather than basically a 50-50 split with the state of South Dakota. So this fixes a couple of problems for Native Americans who right now are suffering under coverages, if you want to call it, from Indian Health Services, which none of us want to inflict on anybody, let alone Native Americans in the future.
All right, Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota. Horrifying. Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you for coming on the show this morning.
You bet.
Appreciate it. Coming